Pharm-Olam's perspective, it was a part of the fact that we'd currently recognised that there was no formal standard for auditing practices, and therefore the introduction of an accredited standard was definitely something that would close that gap. We're also looking to build a community of quality-focused professionals in order to be able to share best practices and to initiate discussions really focused around quality and compliance.
We were interested in being involved in the Audit Academy because obviously our aim is to increase standards across the whole of the industry, to raise the standards in the clinical research community and to extend the amount of reach that we have across different roles within the industry. So we hadn't had the opportunity to work with anybody on auditing before, and it is such a key role, particularly in quality, which we're all talking about at the moment particularly. And so the idea of being able to be involved with Pharm-Olam on this journey was something that we really wanted to do. Well, since 2011, we've been working, IAOCR has been working across the international clinical research community to develop standards. And for the Audit Academy, we consulted with a number of clinical research auditing experts to make sure that we were addressing all the core competencies that were required by somebody who worked as a clinical research auditor, before we then developed a core competency framework for clinical research auditing. So after that, we then mapped the details to the International Standard Classification of Education Framework, which is developed by UNESCO. And then we put it through our industry-leading accreditation process to provide the internationally qualified clinical research auditor standard. Compared with other industries that are highly regulated, where there are professional standards that are looked after by a professional body, within the pharmaceutical industry and within clinical research, there are no regulated standards of approach for either people or processes. And so one of the things that IAOCR has been involved in for many years now is to actually develop these clinical research competencies and competency frameworks and pioneer the way basically to get some globally accepted competency standards in place.
And by improving those and raising those levels, then you are ultimately kind of benefiting, as Karen said, the whole of the industry to reduce the cost of quality as well as improving the presence of quality.
Yes, because if we get things right first time by having quality staff who know what they're doing and are competent in their roles, then obviously we reduce the cost overall of the research, as you're saying, yes.
The Audit Academy is a comprehensive end-to-end training programme which is designed to fully develop operational auditors that could then go out into the field and audit clinical data. It is a great opportunity for those clinical staff that are currently working in the industry or a related industry that are looking for career progression that would enable them to perhaps not go down the traditional route of maybe going into management. And they're really keen to continue working closely with the data, and they want to expand their expertise and their role into a recognised and respected career move. So it offers perhaps an alternative pathway into something that is more data related and is recognised within the industry.
Yes, and you've already done a pilot, haven't you, Lyn, in terms of this course, and you had quite a range of people, a range of learners on that course, and they went on to do some different things.
That's correct. So we ran this as an internal programme, again, to offer people options to expand on their transferable skills and to build new techniques and to broaden their experience. And we found that a lot of senior CRAs were particularly suitable for this. They found it engaging and a good opportunity to diversify their skill set. Also those working in the safety departments and pharmacovigilance, and those working in regulatory affairs. So all associated with working with data in a regulated environment. It offered a really good opportunity for people to develop their careers.
The auditing function is a key role in terms of checking the quality of all of the work that goes on within the clinical research industry. So the benefits of having a standard for the auditors within the industry is that we will then know that the quality that of those people is of a certain standard, and that therefore, if they're the people who are actually assessing the quality of the work, then the standards overall are going to be increased.
So that was one of the catalysts for us then transferring our internal program into an external program, obviously to get that credibility and that recognition we needed to be accredited, and extending it initially to our vendor network, so that and quite a diverse and to diversify as well. So those working in other CROs, those working in laboratories, clinical supplies, translational services, all of which are working in the clinical trial environment, but then have to be auditable and compliant with the regulatory standards. So the external course was developed in order to provide and extend the benefit of that internationally recognised standard to a wider audience, and as Karen was saying, to help improve and raise overall approaches towards achieving a quality culture, reducing the cost of quality, improving inspection and audit readiness. From Pharm-Olam's perspective, it was the fact that we recognised that IAOCR had that established experience in training programme accreditation, but also specifically their independent relationship with world regulators was definitely a key piece for us.
And of course, you've already worked with us before, Lyn, haven't you? So that was a good start for us in terms of our collaboration, because you'd already gone through our programme to be an accredited trainer back in 2015, I think that was.
That's correct.
So
yes.
you were very much aware of what we did and how we worked, and actually I was the trainer on the course, so we had met as well. So we were both familiar with each other, and you were familiar with what IAOCR did in their accreditation programs, and I think that the idea of the fact that we are a globally recognised independent accreditation is a very important one, and one that you picked up on. And we were going back to the beginning of IAOCR. We were the first to lead an industry-wide initiative to develop the clinical research competency frameworks, and prior to us actually getting involved in that, there were no globally accepted standards at all. And we are the only independent, globally recognised provider of accreditation of people, processes and organisations. So I think we got involved with you back in December, wasn't it?
Yes, it was just before Christmas 2019. So as you mentioned, I was already trained. I was already a certified clinical trainer to the IAOCR accredited standards. So that was a key part in helping to expedite the accreditation of this new course that we were then taking forward, because having an accredited trainer is a component part of that. So we were accredited, then we only had to look at accrediting the material, and also me and my colleague as an assessor. So we had to become verified assessors as well. So it was just, we were already one step into that accreditation process, which I think took about 6 to 8 weeks in total.
Yes, it was. It was very, very swift. I think the reason that it went so well was we took a very collaborative approach, which we always do, and a very flexible approach to not changing too much of the materials that you already had in place, but adapting them, as you say, to meet the requirements of an accreditation. And I think because you'd been through the process yourself, you knew what accreditation meant. And I think we easily blended your subject matter expertise with our expertise in the accreditation process to come up with a really good, robust accreditation programme. But I think looking back on our first meeting, Lyn, even though you were aware of the accreditation process, it is a steep learning curve, isn't it, to understand what is actually involved in the process.
The beginning part was definitely adapting to the requirements and the terminology as well of what accreditation means. So I think in a traditional training forum, you are looking at setting objectives, and it's quite objective driven, whereas this is kind of more learning outcome driven, so and competency focused. So you're not necessarily looking at what the objectives are for each component piece from the delivery perspective. You're looking at the output of the learners and their learning outcomes and competencies in order to meet that accreditation standard?
Yes, so we started off at the very beginning putting together a set of competencies based on experience and expertise from within Pharm-Olam of what an auditor really needs to be able to do. And from that, we then developed learning outcomes and assessment criteria, as Lyn says, which are what we want the person who goes through the course to be able to demonstrate when they finish the course. So a learning outcome is stipulated, and then we have something that we actually will assess so that they can show us that they're able to do that. And then we have to work out how we're actually going to evidence that. And that's quite a skill as well, working out what those things are. So it's the terminology, it's the understanding that we're not just going to accredit a training course and anybody that goes through it can get an accreditation. It's a very robust process where people have to actually evidence that what they've learnt on the course and added to what they do on a day-to-day basis will evidence that they're competent in the areas that we want them to be competent in. So I think that we had a very good relationship, but you had a very good training course already in place, and I think that expedited us moving forward very quickly in the process.
I think the nice thing for us in this relationship was the fact that, as you said, we had the material already there. It was a case of just going through and making sure that each output was aligned to your requirements. The good thing for us was the very quick realization that there was no limit to the way that we would deliver the material in order to still meet the accreditation standards. And that is something that I think can often be perceived of that rigidity of having it accredited formally and recognised, is that it's very heavily based on traditionally delivered material, and with a lot of the assessments being limited to a written output that is then rigidly marked to a marking scheme. Yes, there is an element of, obviously, from that accreditation part, rigidly marking it, but it doesn't always have to be a written assessment. We've already established when we were talking earlier on that the auditor role has a lot of component parts to it. That it's very process driven, but it is a lot of business skills as well. You are looking to use articulate vocabulary, you have to be speaking impartially, you've got to maintain rapport and a professional tone. Therefore, we wanted to be able to measure that using methods like mock inspection interviews or mock audit interviews. Being able to monitor the way that somebody would, for example, deliver a closing statement in a closing meeting for an audit. So therefore we were able to do these things like by recording the learners in a learning scenario and then use that output to monitor against a very well structured marking scheme. So we were able to work with our current material to keep it quite diverse, engaging, interesting, highly relevant, but it's still got that accredited output at the end. And that was great for us to know, because it meant that we didn't feel we had to compromise on our training delivery. So the initial collaboration between IAOCR and Pharm-Olam was particularly well matched, because I think both companies, it's fair to say, have got that similar perspective on driving the industry forward to improve standards, to improve quality, the cost of quality, the predominance of quality, and so that we're not only just having that day-to-day inspection or audit readiness standard, but you're actually looking at immersing standards throughout all of the related processes in clinical trials.
Yes, and it fits very, very well with the IAOCR ethos, which is to overall drive standards of competency up in the clinical research industry, where there are no professional standards at the moment. And we felt that working with Pharm-Olam in terms of accrediting the auditing function would be a great opportunity, because the auditing function is the quality function within the clinical research industry. And if we could raise standards within the auditing role, then we would be definitely well on the way to really improving the overall standards of clinical research that are going on a daily basis within each of our clients.
Yes, I think obviously auditing has that element of external surveillance, but there is a huge part of this, and this is discussed in quite a lot of detail in the Audit Academy, that element of self-inspection, that element of, if you know how your own company should look, you know what to look for when you're then dealing perhaps with a subcontractor or a contractor, or you're working collaboratively with other parts of the industry. So it's building awareness of the standards both internally and expectations externally. So the reason we decided on a remote course over the more traditional face-to-face option was multifaceted, really. We wanted to be able to have easier access to for a global audience. We identified that this was very much a global, there was an appetite out there for it globally, and if you have a face-to-face option, it is a lot more it's a different media. There's a lot more restrictions to the way that and the availability and the accessibility for people to attend. By going with a remote model that incorporated all of the modern learning techniques, that blended approach, that element of having the live interactive webinars, the opportunity to catch up on the recordings, all of the materials, the central repository for all of the reference materials and additional articles, the social media elements so that they could have a discussion, share lessons learned, best practices, etc. That we would be able to run this cohort more often, at more frequent cohorts, so that we could then offer it more regularly globally. So currently our cohort has got 25 learners, which we felt was an optimum number to support through this quite intensive experience, to make sure that they had everything they needed. But also we have representatives of 15 different countries in 17 different companies that are representing other CROs, clinical supplies, central laboratories, translational services. So we always designed it as a remote model so that it could be learner directed. And the fact that it has now been launched in the middle of the COVID pandemic actually really well positioned it for it to be completely adapted to that remote model, because it was always designed to use these pieces immediately. So it's actually, the launch of this has been very successful for us. If we'd gone down the face-to-face route, yes, they would have had a different experience, and it would have had an equally immersive experience, but it would have meant a bigger adaptation to then try and put it into the remote learning format. But sometimes if you haven't built those pieces in at the beginning, you are compromising some of the quality of on the deliverables.
Yes, and I think that a lot of the time people believe again that accreditation can only be done with a very formal face-to-face set of trainings, followed by, as we mentioned before, quite a lot of written assessments at the end of it. But it's possible to do an accreditation with this very flexible approach that Lyn has put together in terms of the training that's given, and also the support that's given as well for the learners when they're doing their assessments, the timing of everything. And accreditation can be very flexible. It can fit in with all of these different delivery options and methods of collection and assessment. And we've worked very closely together to make sure that for all the learners, as we've said before, it is a good experience, and it is the least onerous experience it can be, whilst continuing to be a robust assessment. So I think I'm very confident that this group of learners are going to come through very well. We've obviously seen some of the assessments already. They're coming through, and by means of technology, we're able to support Lyn as she goes through the assessments as well, so that we can keep abreast of how it's going. And things are looking very good at the moment.
We are looking to extend and provide further cohorts so that we can increase the number of people that we go through the accredited course, to build that community and expand on the number of individuals that are interacting with us, sharing their best practices, and continuing to build on lessons learned. So for us, it's we're looking to scale up and extend the current format.
As part of our part of our service, we always, every year, do an assessment, and if there are any changes that need to be made, we have a look at those and constantly review whether the assessments and evidence collection can be done in a better way. And we've always got the learners at the centre of this to make sure that the experience for them is as easy and good as possible. So we're looking forward to continuing to work with Pharm-Olam on the Academy to constantly improve it and to work towards as many different ways of assessing and accrediting auditors across the industry as we can think of, really.
I think Karen said it there as well, where obviously the most positive experience where people have felt that as a learner they've enjoyed the course, they've really helped to build on their knowledge base and their confidence in that field. Then hopefully through recommendation, this is going to be something that their positive experience will help to build on other people wanting to come and join us to, again, build on that, expanding that community of like-minded people.